Hello, listeners. I have a special treat for you today on the Tradie Wife Life podcast. It's going to sound a little different, or actually, it might sound a little same, because I am being joined today by a very special guest. I'm really struggling on the build up here. I'm being joined by a very special guest today. I did promise you very early on when we rebranded the podcast that from time to time, my co-host from the Tradies and Business podcast would be joining me here to share a balanced perspective, because I think we can do a lot of the wife life thing, and maybe sometimes we need to be thinking about the perspective of our husbands and partners as well. So Warwick Bidwell, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Nicole.
How weird is this? You're always in the driver's seat and it's my turn to drive.
I'm trying to sit here as a guest and imagine what it's like to just wait before I'm called on to speak instead of just taking over.
And I'm finding it really weird not to come in with a joke, because it's how we start all of the Tradies and Business episodes.
So I'm going to sit here and be a very respectful guest. I'm going to pretend to be nervous and not know what to say and get you to actually draw some information out of me. How's that?
I'm not going to do that. We're going to roll with this like we would with any other Tradies and Business episode. And the reason we're doing it is we're answering a follower's or a listener's question today. Kylie asked a fantastic question around a subject matter in the Tradie Wife Life podcast group on Facebook. When we recently called for what would you like us to talk about? And I thought this was a fantastic question. I've got a little bit of experience in the answer to this question, unfortunately. However, sometimes you could listen to me until I go blue in the face or your ears pop. And sometimes there's a lot of value in hearing this from somebody other than just me, because this is something Warwick has witnessed and experienced in some of the clients that we've worked with as well. So great opportunity to bring him in on this episode so he can share some of his gold nuggets. Have you got some gold nuggets, Woz?
I might do. I mean, I'm reasonably egotistical and arrogant, so I reckon I do. I'm a man, aren't I? I got a huge ego.
Okay, we're pushing into very dangerous territory.
I have seen, as you've rightly pointed out, Nick, many examples in business of things done well and things done not so well. And fortunately, I'll say, I've experienced some of those myself in a past life with an ex-wife. Had a business that was essentially hers. And so there was an interesting dynamic there around dealing with absence from the business by one of us and what that looked like. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting topic.
All right, let's get clear on what the topic is. Kylie was mentioning that she had some fear. We were talking about fear off the back of one of the other episodes that we've recorded earlier. We were talking about fear around your business. What did you have fear in? And she brought up a fantastic point about having a fear of all of their eggs being in one basket. And that basket was within their business where they're both working together. And should something dreadful happen or unforeseen even happen with her partner, she's not able to carry out the trade task that is the backbone of that business. So she was a little concerned about what that might look like moving forward. Now, just for clarity here, we won't go too much into some of those external services that could be there for you. For example, your insurances. If you don't have income protection and life insurance, etc., you do need to speak to somebody about getting that at least under control or making some decisions around that for you and your business. Likewise, your superannuation, etc., that might be able to help you through some of those times. I'm not going to talk about that quite so much today because we are not professionals in that area. That's far better left to somebody that consult on your personal circumstances. But a great reminder here, if you don't have those in place, now's a great time to be looking into it. What we would like to talk about, though, is the opportunity you have within your businesses right now to safeguard from this ever eventuating. And that's not to say that these things don't happen. I can speak very freely about my own personal experience. Sometimes our partners, something goes wrong. I haven't shared terribly much here, but my husband, nearly 7 years ago now, had a series of breakdowns and was not able to work physically, could not actually even leave the bedroom for 6 weeks. And then there was sort of a hangover period of about 3 months where he wasn't able to contribute to the business much, if at all. And that's what Kylie was talking about here. If there were prolonged periods of time where the main tradesperson was not able to function the business, what happens? What can you do? How can you create that consistent outcome moving forward so that you still generate the income that is required to support your family? Warwick's alluding to something very similar within his own experience. And then we've had several clients go through this during their time with us. So we have a sense of experience to draw on here to answer some of those questions and give you an idea and an understanding of what can be put into place right now so that, God forbid, something did happen for you or your partner within your business, you have the stepping stones in place to ensure that it isn't the huge loss and impact that potentially it could be should you not have taken some of these steps early on. Warwick, would you like to share some of your experience?
Sure, Nicole. Thank you.
Welcome.
So
weird.
It's hard to feel like a guest when I have been co-hosting a podcast for more than 10 years.
It's very
like it's
weird.
20% of my life. That's a bit sad, isn't it? Anyway,
I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's exciting. Maybe it's why people stop me in the street and go, "Are you that guy?"
And that's happened how many times?
Well, they're actually confusing me with the photo they saw of the criminal that stole cars. All right. So I cast my mind back as you were just briefing the listeners, Nick, to a client. Now, they weren't a trade client. This is back in the early days when I used to coach anybody with a pulse. You didn't have to be a tradie, but I did, because of my own background, attract a lot of professional services businesses. And so I worked with accountants, solicitors, financial planners, insurance brokers, psychologists in the healthcare space, all sorts of businesses. And so I had a client who was in the financial planning and life insurance space, ironically. Mm-hmm. Only a young guy in his 30s, wife, kid, and quite a successful business, had, made a lot of changes through coaching. And then he actually was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And had a significant amount of time off work with treatment. And then there were all sorts of side effects from the time out and the surgery and the treatment that led to some pretty serious mental health issues with deep depression and anxiety. And so he couldn't work for, I think, all up, it ended up being about 18 months to 2 years before he was able to fully return to work. And so in the early stages, and his wife had been involved in the business, so she was doing some of the admin, she was involved in some of the team stuff, she was involved in bits of all sorts of things, that classic supporter role, as well as, raising the young family and being the primary, home duties person. Mm-hmm. And so when he first, left the business, essentially, there was a bit of panic and I guess a lot of stress around how the heck they were going to deal with that. And this kind of leads into, because, some of our listeners and perhaps even Kylie that you mentioned before might be thinking, well, we don't have staff, so that's different for us. It's worse for us, which also leads me to one of the things that I think is a strategy that everybody in business should be looking at, is growing to the point where you do have staff. Yeah. Because it gives you a huge fallback position and a massive buffer to having one person who is your productive team member. And in many cases, with many trade businesses, it's just the husband or the partner. It's just the guy. He's the only one that's able to generate income. And I think that exposes a lot of people to a lot of risk, exactly as you just outlined there with Kylie's question. So the thing that these guys were able to do was the wife was able to, with the support of me as their coach, of course, and the support of, and they weren't a big business. I think at that stage they only had maybe 2 staff. There was a part-time admin person supporting her and one other full-time productive qualified person. So, you could call that one other tradesperson and a part-time admin support. And so with that structure, the wife was actually able to rally the troops, get some more hours from the admin person, work closely with the other productive qualified person. And in fact, they went and recruited another, let's call him a tradesperson.
Yeah.
Quite quickly, and went into some aggressive marketing. Again, they had a coach who was part of driving that strategy and keeping them out of contractionism and fear and, just survival mode, and actually grew the business while he was, is it convalescing?
Mm-hmm.
While he was recovering. They grew the business by, I think, 2 or 3 staff over that 12 months, 18 months period. And so by the time the husband came back to work, he came back to a business that had grown and was doing reasonably well. They had some business expenses cover, which is another one of those strategies that you mentioned, Nick. But I think that that story really highlighted for me the insurance benefit, the non-insurance insurance of having staff, even if it's one other person who could step up or be trained or pushed or leaned on or whatever it might be, in those unlikely scenarios, but they still happen.
Unfortunately, they do happen. I as hard as we might try, we can't always avoid dreadful situations from eventuating. It's how exposed we've allowed ourselves to be that creates the outcome. In our case, perhaps we were fortunate that we had so many staff. We had 12 staff, 33 subcontractors, 3 jobs on the ground at the time, $1 million jobs. And we had some administration support. So I certainly can't say it was easy. However, much like the couple that you're talking about there, Warwick, we'd already done a lot of the work to get the business out of his head and into systems and structure so that others were able to jump into some of those roles and assist me to continue to push through those jobs. I don't know how to build a house. I do not know the first thing, or I did not then know the first thing about renovations, how to create the outcomes for the clients. I don't know how to read plans. I don't know how to order materials. I didn't know any of those things, didn't have a clue. However, because we had some structure in place, I didn't have to know because some of that early work was done. And then I was able to draw on the support that we had around us to help me drive those outcomes so that our clients weren't missing out. Our team was still able to go to work and function. We're able to continue to maybe not grow the business, but at least push through that period of time until he was able to come back to the helm without it impacting seriously financially too much. We had probably the first 2 weeks, we really struggled. I didn't know what to do. I really struggled with, I'm trying to be a carer and take care of what's happening in front of me whilst figuring out how on earth do I jump in and take control of what's going on. So it just rolled on for a couple of weeks for what was already in place, and it didn't look pretty. I can promise you that. It was pretty messy. But after those first 2 weeks, when we were able to get the understanding of what he was going through, put the personal stuff, perhaps to one side separately, at least from the business stuff. So then I could focus on the business stuff and how to generate that support and move forward. And it really relied on the fact that we had the systems and structure in place. And I think that's what you've just identified with your young couple of clients that you're working with, is that systems and structure. And that's what we wanted to talk about today, is this concept of taking what's in your partner's head and turning that into your business structure. Because generally, and we know from the clients that we meet early on, they tend to be walking around with all of this knowledge inside them because they've created systems and structure, albeit we can't see it because it's in their head. However, it is there. You're doing the same thing in business pretty consistently and driving similar results. But because it's in their head, we can't see it. So we can't therefore take over from that. And that's where I think we leave ourselves exposed.
Nick, I think there's a great body of evidence that I hope proves to your listeners that what the fellas do is actually not that big a deal. And I don't say that out of disrespect for if you're listening to this and you have a husband or a partner who's, slogging their guts out on the tools, whether they're a builder or a landscaper or a plumber or electrician or a mechanic, it doesn't matter. I see two things that are evidence of the fact that what they do is replaceable and replicatable. And one piece of evidence is the existence of business coaches.
Yes.
And the existence of business coaches who are coaching those business people or those tradies who have never picked up a hammer or a spanner or a set of Stilsons or whatever the heck your tool is in your trade, because the technical aspects of building a house or digging a ditch or twisting wires or whatever, and I'm talking that down a bit. And again, I don't mean this out of disrespect. What I am looking at is the fact that you can reduce down what most tradespeople do to a system that is teachable and repeatable with a requisite level of knowledge. And if business coaches needed to know how to wire a house in order to run an electrical business, which is essentially what we do as coaches, we run multiple businesses at a time through the proxy business owners, if you like, or proxy business managers, because we're teaching business owners how to think differently, how to run their teams better, how to be better financial stewards, how to be marketing gurus. And so, at the crux of it all, coaches like you and I are actually running 30, 40, 50 businesses at a time. We just have 50 general managers in place who are executing our direction as the CEO. Now, I apologize if I come across sounding a bit arrogant and up myself. It's not my intention, although I have a very good talent for doing that sometimes. And so to me, that means that anybody who actually wants to step into that role, aka the wife, and think about herself as that level within the business, be it CEO or general manager, you can manage anybody twisting wires and laying pipes. Now, if that person happens to be your partner, so be it. But they're replaceable. They are absolutely replaceable. I think the guys do a great job of building up all of the knowledge that they have in their head. And I'd be keen for your perspective from the builder and your experience, Nick. But really, each tradie has a particular way of doing things. They have a way they build a house or that they do plumbing, but it all is done to a standard. It all has to fit within a building code or a plumbing code. There's a particular way that pipes get roughed in. There's a particular way that a PowerPoint gets installed. Every electrician is largely doing all of that stuff the same way. Yeah. Switchboard wire ups, like they're all even swapping notes in Facebook groups. So no one's doing anything different. They think they are. The difference is they're keeping all of the other stuff in their head, which is the business systems. How do they issue an invoice? You shared an example of one of our own clients from Tradies in Business this morning of the way he goes about generating an invoice. And it's unnecessarily complicated. And I think a large part of that is either because they don't know any different and they haven't bothered to find out, or there's this weird self-sabotage aspect to it where they do it this complicated way because it serves their narrative of I'm the only person who can do this and I'm so busy that I don't have time to scratch myself, because that somehow is honourable and admirable that, we've got our bums hanging out and we have to work our tail off.
I think so much of this comes back to understanding that business and then what you do are two different things. So business is the structure and the model, and what you deliver, that's just the outcome. It's less important than the business part of what we do.
Yep.
And anybody can run a business if they have the skills to do so, and we can all skill ourselves to do so. And that's what I really want to take all of you listening to this podcast today, I want you to take out of this that you have the opportunity in the current roles that you serve to make a determination that you're going to step up and be the business manager or the general manager or the CEO of your company.
100%.
You have that opportunity, and 9 times out of 10, your partners will be super supportive of that because they love what they do with their hands. They love the tool stuff. Many of them eventually want to get off the tools, but they don't know how to go from A to B. And you're the superpower within your business that can create that stepping stone for them by helping them take the structure that's in their head and create that within the business externally. I've got a couple of tips for how to do that because it's not always easy to peg them down. They're like slime and a nail. It doesn't happen. One of the things that worked really, really well for me to try and understand how he was doing what he did. This is in the very early days before he was unwell. It was as the business was growing and he needed some administration support. So somehow we had to figure out what it was that he did and why he did it. First and foremost, I shadowed him for quite some period of time. It wasn't always the easiest thing. Yes, there were some disagreements, and I had to learn how to keep myself in check and not make suggestions. That point in time was really just about understanding what he currently did. That was hugely beneficial for me, understanding the way he thinks, the communication style that he had, the way the team ran, etc. All of that came out of just following him around for a couple of weeks, or a period of time that works for you within your business. That was very beneficial, and just documenting what I did notice and see. The other thing that I took advantage of was his drive time. So many of our jobs were half an hour away from our office. His drive time, there is something about men and teenage boys, actually just all males, that is incredible in a car. You put them in a car and they're doing something with their hands, and somehow all of the stuff, when you ask the right questions, just comes out of their mouths. I don't know how it works or why, and trust me, it does. So I would either jump on the phone or jump into the car and do the drive time with him and take notes, ask questions. Now, that, of course, took me into a space where I needed to understand what I wanted to understand in that conversation before I had it. So I would have to do some critical thinking first. Some of that, if we talk to one example, it was perhaps what I now know or knew then was a sales process. He'd never heard of the term. So understanding what he did from the minute the phone called all the way through to eventually signing that contract, that came out of a conversation in the car. Okay, tell me what you do now. And then what happens? And then what happens from there? And all of a sudden, you've got written down version 1 of your sales process. You have a process in place. You're already doing this stuff, or he's already doing it to create the outcomes. You have the opportunity to change it up from there and do what is possible to take that away from him so that he's not currently continuing to do all of those steps. It also safeguards you. If something goes wrong and he's got to have a couple of weeks off work, but you're still getting inquiries through, you're able to follow through on the process that's already set in stone and then make tweaks to drive even more consistent outcomes, better outcomes, not wasting time with tie kickers, etc. So they're my 2 tips. They worked incredibly well. Once I had that information, I documented it into visuals, worked particularly well. Words were really hard at the end of a really long, exhausting day. And so flow charts or visuals with icons and things worked extremely well for me to communicate back to him what that looked like, so that he was then able to see that structure that he had actually put in place, and went a long way to then him wanting to share more of that information so he wasn't carrying around that burden all the time. There was a lot of conversation last year about the invisible load that women were carrying. I'm here to tell you, your men are carrying the same invisible load. It just looks a little different. And they are weighted down, particularly as business owners, very heavily with the burden of expectation, taking care of us and our families, ensuring beautiful outcomes for us all. And then they feel like they're letting us down because we don't get time off or holidays or any of the things we thought we'd get when we first started in business. That weighs really, really heavily on them. And we have an opportunity to help them understand how they're getting the results that they are, and then how to take that a step further and improve them where necessary. So they're really simple, really easy. Yes, they do take some critical thinking from you. I encourage you to drop into the Tradie Wife Life podcast group, where you can ask what kind of questions that you should be asking, or share what area of your business you'd like to work on, so that you have an opportunity to draw on some of the experience of others, including myself, so that we can help you start to get some of these systems documented. so that you're able to move forward. Because, and agreeably, that's one step in this entire process, but it's one step that you can take now that begins to safeguard should something happen. It's reducing your exposure to risk.
Mm. And, if I use that that young couple example from earlier, had they had more systems in place and more things documented, it would have been much easier, even for the husband, to be involved in the business management from home. Despite the fact that he was recovering and had a lot of challenges health-wise, he still had some capacity. And, most of the risk is not a complete removal of hubby, your partner. It's a temporary, whether it's short-term or medium-term, absence from the business, but sometimes they still have some sort of capacity. And I think that whole approach serves two benefits, Nick. It sets you, as the wife listening to this, it sets you up for a future eventuality. So, if something does go sideways and you're left like, holy crap, how do we deliver these projects when my partner's laid up in bed? But it also sets you up to actually improve and grow your business beyond the current scenario, which is, holy crap, how do we deliver these projects? Yeah. Because you're tapped out, both of you. So I think it's something worth pursuing for the double benefit that comes from that. The other thing that allows you to do as well, particularly in the trade space, is get subbies in to complete the work.
Absolutely. If
you have everything in place that you talked about, Nick, and it doesn't, ladies, this doesn't have to be, Telstra Small Business Award winning level of system and structure and documentation and everything. It can literally just be bullet point lists in a Word document, or, a free flowchart program, flowchart of your sales process. Like this stuff can be super basic. Keep in mind, it's got to be tradie proof.
Yes.
It's got to be mail proof. We have an attention span of a gnat when it comes to anything that's not mountain bikes, motorbikes, cars, footy, fishing, everything that interests a bloke. You want a guy to look at office stuff. It's got to be super simple. So it actually makes it easier to get this done. Less words is more useful. But it means that you can go get a subby. Now, sure, you're not going to make huge profit out of that. You might not make any profit, but you can keep things ticking over.
Yeah.
And that takes a heck of a lot of stress away than saying to clients, look, I'm really sorry, but we're not going to be able to do that bathroom reno for you that we've signed a contract for. Please don't sue us. You can just get subbies in.
You can totally do that. And I think there's another overall advantage here. If we do the work to put some structure in place now while things are great and everyone's healthy and well, most tradies I meet have a goal of getting off the tools to some extent. This is what allows them to get to that point of getting off the tools, this structure. So what you're creating now, one way or another, is future-proofing whatever it is that you decide to do. You can't take 6 weeks off and have your business run if you don't have this structure in place. If you want to do a trip up to Central Australia, which so many of our people do, or take the kids on an overseas holiday, or just take some downtime for the two of you, you cannot do that if you don't have the systems and structure in place. You can put a stop on your business, but it's not generating income. We're dropping off the face of the earth for potential clients. They're wondering where we're gone. They go looking for other people. Like, so many detrimental outcomes for stopping business for a period. If you put the structure in place now, you can work towards at least doing those things that you would like to be doing, where your business is facilitating your lifestyle, because that's what many of us go into business for in the first place. Flexibility, being able to take holidays when we want, having a disposable income so that we're able to afford to take holidays, etc. All of that starts with systems and structure. And as Warwick really well pointed out, they don't have to be complicated. Don't let us or anyone else tell you that these need to be complex systems like you would see in McDonald's or Woolworths or somewhere else where everything's very autonomous. Your systems do not need to be that complicated. They can be bullet points. Flowcharts are best, particularly where there are pictures. Pictures work amazingly well because, as again, Warwick has referenced, tradies know how to do their trade. They're taught how to do their trade. Yes, there needs to be a level of supervision, etc. And you can hire people to supervise them. You can hire people who have an expectation and KPIs, etc., to ensure that the quality is still there, that they're delivering on timelines, that productivity is there. You can have people assist you with that. What you can't have people assist you with is getting that knowledge if somebody is already unwell. If we had have left it all till after the builder was in bed and that unwell, we would have been in a lot more trouble than we were.
Absolutely. How long am I allowed to talk for in these episodes, Nick?
You can talk as long as you like.
Talk as long as my bladder can sustain.
Yes.
I feel like another area of addressing this topic is around the it's hard to stay away from headspace stuff, Nick. It's around the headspace of the tradie wife and partner. And you and I see this a lot in our tradiepreneur community and in the trade business owners that we speak with. And I know I've certainly seen it a lot just with business owners in general over the years where, for whatever reason, and I'm going to amazingly stay out of politics and social commentary for a moment, which is most unlike me. But for whatever reason, we have businesses that seem to have men as the nominated or assumed leader, manager, boss, whatever you like. Now, there's plenty of examples where women are in that role, but in small business, small to medium business, it's a common paradigm that the guy he's in the driver's seat, wife or partner's in the navigator's chair, and yes, they're doing it together, but largely there's this headspace from women, because, we're talking to the ladies here today, that, I can't do that, or I don't know enough about this, or I don't want to tread on his toes, I don't want to disrespect him. A lot of positive reasons for not really pushing into that leadership space. And I get that this can, for want of a better word, trigger a lot of interpersonal conflict between men and women in long-term partnerships. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say a lot of ladies do themselves a disservice by stepping back when not necessarily being told to or dictated to by their fella.
Yep.
Now, if that's you and you have a guy who's just working his bum off because that's all he knows how to do and probably getting crappy about things, I'm not sticking up for the blokes here. What I really want to do with this, and I feel like maybe I'm failing miserably, Nick, is tell the ladies that step in and take the bloody wheel.
Yeah.
Just give him a shove, give him a hip shove out of the driver's chair and say, I've got this. I've got this. I've got this. Because sometimes that's what it takes for the blokes to go, yeah, actually, yeah, you do. Or, oh, that's awesome. Now, they may not admit to being relieved, but I have the benefit of talking to a lot of blokes, and through our Tradiepreneur program, we do a lot of ladies only and blokes only sessions. And I know most of our guys are bloody relieved when their women do step up and step in, because they don't know what they're doing. They're just doing it because they don't think anybody else either wants to or knows how to. And so they just assume the role. It's not necessarily because they have some arrogant belief that they're the best person for the job. They just do it because that's what they do. They just do stuff. And until the ladies actually step in, and I've seen this even with my own wife and I, where she stepped into leadership roles within our relationship, I'm like, oh my gosh, thank goodness she's taken over that, because I don't know what I'm doing. So I think some of this is also the ladies proactively pushing into that headspace of business manager, general manager, CEO of their business, and not waiting to get permission or for some sort of, looking for some sort of way of saying, oh, well, I don't know enough yet. It's like, yeah, you do. And you know what? He doesn't know that much either.
No, he's great at running his the tools part of his business. He's a great tradie. You have an opportunity to be a great business manager, general manager,
Exactly.
CEO. And we see that we're really blessed in our community. We work with lots of couples, and all of those couples we work with, the women are jumping in and taking the steering wheel, and they're really driving brilliant results. And it's creating better outcomes for them in their relationships, for them with their business, for them with their families. It's changing everything. I think that is the overall message here today. If you'd like to protect yourself and safeguard yourself the best that you can moving forward within your trade business, you have an opportunity to jump in and take that wheel and create those outcomes right now. Don't leave it till it's too late.
Absolutely.
Now, if you've enjoyed this little soiree with Warwick and I, we do have another business podcast, generally not directly aimed at the blokes, but we do talk in a more blokey fashion. If you'd like to jump on over to Tradies and Business, we have our podcast that is the longest running trade business podcast
in Australia.
Is it Australia or the world? I reckon we should.
Could be the world, Nick. We'd take the global title.
Let's take the global title. I'll jump in the ring and knock it out with anyone. Great space for your partner, your tradie, to be listening to some fantastic business concepts. We give away lots of free resources there. We talk a lot about creating that change within your business. We would love to see you over there as well. And you can always find Warwick over on our socials at Tradies and Business on Instagram and Facebook if you'd like to step into the ring and learn more about his political viewpoints or watch him jump on his soapbox. If you've enjoyed this episode or you have any questions or that answered a question for you, I would love to hear from you in the Tradie Wife Life group. There's a bunch of us over there regularly discussing these podcast episodes. If you have any suggestions for topics that you would like us to cover or anything you'd like Warwick's opinion on, please stay away from politics. Just drop us a note in the Tradie Wife Life Facebook group. Thank you for listening. And Warwick, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Nick. It's been a pleasure being a guest on your show.
It's so weird.